Not mad that we're housing damned pirates? We're even feeding that scum." The complaining voice woke Leopold Dakar from his slumber as he struggled to not simply cover his face and get a few more minutes of blessed sleep. The worst part about waking up was not the waking up part, but shaking off the dizziness and sluggishness that followed. He groaned as another voice joined the first. "Yeah, no one is happy about it. But the princess ordered that they wouldn't be touched, and we must obey. Even the damn blue bloods are following her orders," said the second feminine voice. "Makes you wonder, ain't it? Why would she keep some damn pirates alive at all?" a third voice asked. "It is not our place to question a noble, let alone a royal. The princess must have her reasons, and I, for one, won't question it," a fourth voice added. "What about you, Dakar?" the first voice asked. Groaning again, Leopold opened his eyes, yawned, and sat at the edge of his bunk. Looking at his four roommates, he took a moment to let another yaw, wincing at his bad breath before smacking his lips together. Lazily, he looked around the rather ample, by Principality standards, commoner quarters the Noir Navio was equipped with. Instead of pushing up to 8 commoner crew members in a room with only bunk beds and a small closet for each of them with enough space for no more than 3 uniforms, their quarters offered more space, remarkably comfortable beds, pillows, and even a small space for them to place anything of value, be it mementos, books, or utilitarian tools like toothbrushes. The room itself was always at a comfortable temperature, much like the rest of the ship. The lights were bright, but not too intense. The way everything was designed deviated from the standard blockiness most Principality ships were made with, having fewer grays and dull colors and more white, soft blues, and changing hues of gray and black across what would be the commoner areas. All in all, Leopold liked the upgrades and the extra space. Turning to face his roommates, who were waiting to hear his opinion, he shrugged. "The princess has to have a good reason to keep him around. That's all we should care about. We're commoners. We don't have a say in the decisions our superiors make," he answered, and while 2 agreed with him, the other 2 groaned. "And here I thought bumping elbows with nobles would get you to hear more about their plans," one complained. "Hey, Leopold, how does it feel to, be part of an elite force?" one of the women asked, her tone curious and intrigued. "Elite," Leopold chuckled. "The only thing that makes us elite is a squadron name and nothing more. We've done nothing to truly earn the title, though we've been practicing constantly in the training chambers. Come on, Dakar, you never speak about your day-to-day with us and we're all curious. You're a commoner among blue bloods. What, do you serve them drinks or something? Are you there out of pity?" The first one said with a hostile grin. Instead of taking the bait, Leopold simply shrugged again before replying. He didn't even know the names of his roommates. They worked on different areas, and he only ever saw them at the start and end of a shift. Most of his time was spent training, wasting time watching his entertainment videos, or spending time with his teammates. He only used his bunk to sleep and nothing more. If I am there out of pity, then that is new to me. Wyatt Staples picked me to be a part of the composters, so go ask him," Leopold finished with a smirk. "And risk my head approaching the Astor dog? No, thank you," the man replied, earning a nod from the woman to his left whilst the other 2 seemed to share the sentiment but weren't as vocal about it. Now that was new to the pilot. "Astor dog?" he asked, confused. "You gave the lieutenant that nickname?" "What else am I to describe a dog but for a dog?" the man countered. "The people we picked up on Woodshaft call him the Woodshaft Ace or just the Ace, but we know what he truly is." Leopold crossed his arms and frowned. He wasn't angry by any means, but he was genuinely curious. He had heard a few rumors and curses here and there, but nothing so direct before regarding the now heterochromatic-eyed leader. And what is he? Isn't it obvious? He's a damn blue blood through and through. From the moment he arrived at the Exalted Virtue, he was promoted to lieutenant despite being a commoner like us. Likely story. I heard that he's an undercover agent of the Astors, and everything he's done is nothing but show. I heard that he's a failed Royal Marine. I mean, he just happened to save the princess and then receive the protection of the prince himself? I saw the competition. He beat one of the unwinnable simulations. Who does that? Not a mere commoner, that much I know. Samantha tried to flirt with him despite I told her not to get near him. She said he showed no interest in her. I mean, she's a commoner, but come on, she's very pretty. And what he did in Woodshaft against the Drazen fighters. Insanity. I don't know any pilot that could pull such moves except for maybe gold aces like Commander Redford. And that's a maybe. Do you really think he could be a lone wolf in disguise? They're rare as can be. Doubt it. Lone wolves are well known and showy. You know, boastful. This Wyatt Staples, if that's even his real name, came out of nowhere, and he sure doesn't seem the type to stand out much. I bet he's the bastard son of Commander Redford, or maybe he's like a long-lost Astor. His eyes changed after we left Matcha. I bet his eyes were always like that, and he was using contacts or some sort of genetic alteration for a time just to pass for a commoner. While his roommates shared and countered their theories on who and what Wyatt was, he could only listen in dumbfounded silence until, unable to contain it anymore, he broke into a fit of laughter that shut his companions up. He laughed until his belly hurt, trying and failing multiple times to tell his conspiratorial roommates how wrong they were, until finally he managed to get himself under control enough to form coherent words. You're all crazy, he pointed out, wiping away a tear while rubbing his bare stomach, still hurting from laughing so hard. Is everyone around me crazy? Wyatt Staples is none of those things. What makes you say that so certainly? What do you know, Dakar? Asked the second woman. For one, I know that Wyatt Staples was just a commoner who was in the right place at the right time and was the right man for the job. Call it fate or coincidence, I don't care. But he truly saved Princess Clara by chance and was rewarded for it. Anyone else would have received the same reward that turned him into a lieutenant in his place, Leopold said, smiling. You can't possibly believe that, Leopold, the second man countered. Everything that he's received, his standing with the princess herself and the prince publicly making him a knight banneret, no commoner could strive for such heights. He's right, Dakar, not to mention that Cynthia Winfield, the Bloodrend, is training him for some reason. He's surely got plenty of implants in him already. Many nobles are miffed about that, the first woman added. From what I've seen, he's not just a mere commoner, Leopold replied and raised a hand before his roommates could interject. But that doesn't mean he's some sort of secret soldier or anything of the sort. He's a very skilled pilot, and his attitude is hard to describe. But he's certainly not a blue blood in disguise. He's just talented in what he does, and the princess seems to like him for who he is. Hogwash. I call hogwash, the first man protested. Now that you mention it, I've heard that he gets regularly invited to the princess's quarters, the second woman said, her cheeks suddenly taking a light shade of red. Do you know anything about that? Leopold shook his head. Not even a little. Though I'm sure that whatever they do is not related to how that sort of summons goes. Another crafty theory of yours, Dakar? Not a theory. Facts. Leopold smiled and raised a finger. Not once has Wyatt exuded that I had a good time aura about him. A shame. If I were in his place, I'd at least try to flirt with such beautiful women, Tildy. You are a beast in heat, Dakar, the same woman said, blushing harder, but Leopold merely shrugged. Just telling the truth. Their reputation be damned. If Wyatt seems to be comfortable around them, then they can't be that bad, said the pilot before stretching out his arms and standing up. But enough chatter. Since we're all up, we should take a bath and prepare for our shifts. I still think you're wrong, Dakar. You're still stuck here with us, the rest of the rabble, while he is living a high-end life, the first man said with disdain. Leopold internally glared at the man, recognizing that his disdain was born from envy. The group of 5 walked out of their quarters, making their way to the communal showers. Quickly arriving, they entered, and 2 staff members handed them a dry towel and a basket containing their ration of unisoap. As much as he enjoyed the feminine figure and the pleasures of the flesh, Leopold had long since lost that interest in the communal showers. Something about being naked around a few dozen men and women to do something as vital and mundane as taking a shower sapped any sense of eroticism out of the experience. As the hot water cleaned his body and he used his unisoap to wash his hair and body with it, he couldn't stop his mind from wandering off. He was aware that many, if not most, of the commoners that had been transferred from the prince's fleet harbored resentment towards his leader. He counted himself among the few who saw Wyatt Staples for the talented pilot he was, but he could also understand how and why his fellow commoners felt the way they did. Envy and jealousy. Why was he the fortunate one? Why him and not any of them? What made Wyatt Staples so special? Those were the questions that ran through the minds of many commoners who looked upon Wyatt's success with gritted teeth and clenched fists, as if they wouldn't shove the ladder behind them and lord themselves over the rest in their achieved glory. It was hypocrisy on their part, to want something others had achieved. But that was just part of a commoner's reality. To desire for more knowing your place was at the bottom. To look down with disdain if you managed to gain something of significance, letting everyone know you were better than everyone else, that you deserved to stand over them. But Wyatt hadn't done that. Not once. Not a single time. He had yet to treat him like a lesser just because he was a noble now. He never ordered staff or crew members around. He never flaunted his position. He never boasted. Never lorded himself over his fellow commoners like so many new nobles tended to do. He was in his full right to do so. He was not only a noble, but one closely linked to the royal family now and serving directly under Princess Clara. He had the power to do just about anything he wanted, and most likely get away with it. But he had not displayed any of those tendencies. On the contrary, he was humble, openly honest, and took accountability for his actions and mistakes. His roommates were right. There was something special about Wyatt Staples. But as a smile spread across his face, Leopold was certain that what made the lieutenant so special was his character, convictions, and personality. Something tells me that serving under him will be entertaining. With any luck, I won't get shoved to the side. Noir Navio's Brig. "What more do you want from us, Astor?" the Spitman asked as he looked up from within the cell he was sharing with his companions. Clara Astor stood in front of the cell whilst wearing her comfortable mixed armor uniform. She peered down at the only inhabitants of the brig with contained contempt. Milcades and Cynthia flanked her, protecting her, and as much as she wanted to have Wyatt present, he had other duties in his hands. She was not afraid that the straightforward pilot she'd come to truly embrace as one of her few counted friends would think ill of her due to her reputation. She found it incredibly amusing whenever he showcased fear toward her, but his fear was not that of revulsion. Oh no. His fear was primal and, to some extent, respectful. When she revealed to him the truth of his reputation, however, he had expressed not a single ounce of fear directed at her or Cynthia. It puzzled her deeply. Surely he understood how vile her actions taken in the heat of the moment and her stubborn refusal to show any clemency to those guilty before their houses were extinguished. But he simply took it in, accepted her actions, and didn't judge her for it. No, that wasn't quite the truth. He had judged her. The difference was that he deemed her as brutal, cunning, and dangerous, but also just and firm. Was that his commoner upbringing shining through, just accepting her actions as her right to do it? Or was it his more pragmatic view on things at play here? He had been disgusted by the actions of the houses that had, in their infinite stupidity, condemned so many lives to horrific, unnecessary deaths. Maybe he simply agreed that the houses responsible had to pay, and that such a punishment was required. Whatever the reason, one truth was certain about it all. She didn't regret her decision. It had been cruel, yes, but necessary. Looking back at it, she could have taken a different path, made better decisions, and spared the youngest children and the babies at least. Her decision had been born out of reckless emotions, but even now she wondered if she'd truly make a different choice. After all, that experience had been her turning point, opening her eyes to the failings of nobility, the weaknesses of the principality, and her own incompetence. A lesson learned in blood was, sometimes, the only way to truly learn the realities of the world. That was what her father always said, both wisdom and warning intermingled. Clara blinked when she noticed she had remained silent for long moments, just staring down at the trio of adult pirates. With her mind at ease, she tilted her head slightly, confusing the pirates. "What do I want from you?" she asked softly. "What is it that I want from you, I wonder? Justice for your crimes? Your lives in exchange for those you've so recklessly taken? The resources you've stolen? What is it that I want? If you've come to mock us, you're wasting your time. How can you make us crawl lower than we already are, Astor whore?" The woman spat back with venom. "Or maybe you've come to spread your lies to us." "Have I not kept my promise?" Clara countered. "You're being fed and not tortured for information. The teenagers and the children are also being fed, entertained, and kept under strict orders to not be harmed. The babies are safe and healthy, all of them. Elucidate me. How am I a liar in this situation? The trio could only glare at her with revulsion since they were shown evidence that her words were true. "If you're not here to mock us, then why are you here?" asked the metal jaw man. "I'm here to make a rather beneficial bargain," Clara said, her facade breaking as she offered the trio a somber smile that made them shudder for a moment. "I'm certain you're not ignorant enough to reject the tremendous opportunity I am offering you, yes?" The trio shared glances from their sitting positions, and the Spitman replied, "What is it that you want?" Clara lost her smile, regaining her serious, cold expression. "Something rather simple. I want 2 of your babies." You what?" the woman shrieked. "Demon! Monster! What sick, twisted tortures have you prepared for them?" "Can we not jump to unsavory conclusions?" Clara asked firmly, and Cynthia let out a loud groan that echoed across the brig. What do you want to do with the babies?" asked the metal jaw man, proving to be the more sensible of the trio. "You need not know the details, but suffice it to say that they are clean enough to be of use to me and House Astor as a whole. Be assured, however, that regardless of the outcome, their future will be brighter than anything you can provide, and most likely, a long life." "Wouldn't you want that for these babies, at least?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "If you think we'll just hand you over 2 of our babies just so you can turn them into loyal principality mongrels, you can go to hell. Let you fall into a star and burn you to ashes, Astor Tramp," countered the Spit Man. "I'm disappointed at your lack of creativity. Your insults have grown stale and boring. Then again, you're an ignorant, daft, murderous little pirate that finds it challenging to remember how to breathe on his own," Clara retorted, her expression unchanging, and that worse than her showcasing any contempt or derision. "I'm offering you a chance to make a deal and you waste it in such a manner? For pirates, you aren't as opportunistic as I thought you'd be. May I remind you that I can simply take what I want and be done with it?" she asked abruptly, and the trio of pirates froze. "Yet here I am, looking to barter with you for the possession of 2 of your babies in exchange for a reward that I believe you will find more than fair?" Again, the trio exchanged glances for several seconds until the metal jaw man spoke up. "What is your proposal, Astor?" Clara's lips shifted ever so slightly into a barely perceptible smirk. "We'll arrive at Balakura in less than 2 weeks. Upon arrival, you and the children will be handed out to the authorities. You shall be prosecuted, and anyone bearing that hideous mark," she said, pointing at the crying raven skull with blood for tears engraved on their necks, "will likely be summarily executed before the day ends. The rest, who can say?" The princess took a moment to watch their reactions. They were fidgeting, nervous, and knew that she was speaking the truth. But that didn't stop their fear from being overwhelming. After a few cold, long seconds of silent torture, she continued, "That would normally be the case, but those 2 babies are your chance at a much better fate, not only for you, but for the rest of your crew. I can interject and ensure that your fates won't be that grim end. So, our options are to die like the vermin you see us as, or fashion a collar around our necks?" the Spitman asked, eyes narrowed in fury. "You? Why would I want to keep any of you? You are nothing, scum, less than scum. You are parasites at best, utterly worthless to me. Your value is only reflected on the 2 babies I desire to keep," Clara said in no uncertain terms, making the trio recoil at the tone she'd use. "If you accept my deal, I will ensure that you will not only not receive the death penalty, you'll only be imprisoned for 5 years and then released under an entirely new identity with 10,000 credits to your names. More than enough to start a new life. Your tattoos and other pirate symbols will be removed from your skin, of course. What you do after your liberation, I care not for." Using the momentum of her speech, she continued, "The children and the adolescents will be offered a pardon and the chance to serve as auxilia forces in my ship. Those who accept will be trained, re-educated, and their bodies cleansed, and receive a new identity so that they may repent and serve the principality. Those that don't shall be handed to the authorities. The teenagers will share your fate with forced manual labor service. The children with marks will be sent to re-education camps. The children without marks will be set up for adoption after a period of heavy re-education and indoctrination in order to cleanse whatever stupid anarchist beliefs you've filled their minds with. Clara paused, letting her cold, unforgiving stare sill the bones of the trio currently shaking in fear. The metal jaw man stared at her for several long seconds before he turned to his companions. They whispered amongst each other for a few moments before he turned to the princess again. "How do we know you're trying to trick us?" Clara let out a laugh filled with amusement and cold, cruel even, that rumbled across their cell. "What option do you have?" she countered. "You have nothing to bargain with except for what I bring to the table. Am I lying? Am I telling the truth? This is a risk you'll have to take. Choose quickly, for my patience is a finite resource and you are exhausting it rapidly." "Fuck. We're fucked, aren't we?" the woman asked out loud, letting out an empty chuckle. "Quite so," Clara confirmed. "Your answer? If we accept, what would you have us do in exchange for what you offer?" "Princess?" the metal jaw man asked, his defiant spirit finally broken. Only the spit man remained hostile, but alone. His bravado was being snuffed out with each passing second. "After you accept my proposal, you'll be allowed to see the rest of your crew," she said, using that word loosely, "and explain to them what's going to happen. It will be your job to convince them not only that what I'm offering is true, but try to make as many of them to accept the pardon. You will also inform them that 2 of the babies were too sick from the voyage and tragically died despite the best efforts of our medical staff. The remaining babies will be delivered to the proper organizations in Balakura. They will be safe and properly raised. I'll ensure that they are adopted into loving families, saving them from the petty life of criminality you so cravenly chose for yourselves." We can't do that. If we do as you say, they'll think of us as cowards or traitors, sellouts, worse than leashed dogs," the spitman replied, shaking. Clara, unmoved by his words, answered coldly, "It is your choice. Their lives and fortunes are in my hands, but it will be up to you if they take it. I offer salvation, a second chance, a new life. Are your pride and ego worth more than living to see a better tomorrow?" The metal jaw man lowered his head, as did his 2 companions. "We accept your proposal, Princess." "Was that so hard?" Clara asked and turned away from the cell. "What happened to the 2 babies?" The woman looked up, all semblance of defiance drained from her eyes. Only submission and defeat remained. They died. They couldn't handle our escape and died even after your medics tried to save them." "Good," Clara said, pleased. "You shall be escorted out in an hour from now. If you deviate from our agreement, well, even you must realize what will happen if you choose to betray me." The trio didn't reply, choosing to remain silent. With nothing more to say, she walked away, flanked by her bodyguard and the Royal Marine captain. Once they were out of the brig, Milcades spoke up. "Are you going to keep your word?" he asked, his tone curious yet humorous. "For those that accept my offer, and the children and babies?" "Absolutely. The rest will face the consequences of their crimes," Clara replied without an ounce of remorse in her voice. "They've murdered, pillaged, enslaved, and more throughout their lives. I will not spare a moment's notice in giving a new life to those who do not deserve a second chance. For all their claims of hatred and anarchism, they were quick to falter once cornered," Cynthia commented with disgust. "The old man was right all along. Pirates are little better than dangerous wild animals." Milcades chuckled. "I doubt that Redford would be as merciful as you are, Clara." "What about you, Milcades? Will you take 2 pirate babies?" Clara asked, her tone shifting to a softer, gentler one. "They're just babies, innocent from the sins of their parents. Their genetic code was clean and stable enough to be considered acceptable. I wonder who their parents are. Not that it matters now. Their chances of success are low, but even if they fail and survive the process, they'll be worthwhile agents. To find 2 possible candidates like this is worth the price you've put forth, Clara." "I do so enjoy gambling and making worthwhile bets," Clara replied with a smirk spreading across her lips. Have you listened to these other amazing stories on our channel yet? All the links can be found in the description, and we have something for everyone. Wyatt Staples glanced around the war room, every occupant silent as they waited for Commander Redford to stop reading from a data pad. They all sat around a round table with several seats left unoccupied. The officers present were those in charge of one of several divisions across the Noir Navio. Being a lone ship, no matter how advanced, meant that having more than one commander was entirely unnecessary, and only capable officers were sufficient to run the day-to-day activities. Galt Tirome was present as the senior officer representing both the communications division and the bridge deck crew. It had given him a small headache understanding how the red-haired man was simultaneously Commander Redford's most important and direct subordinate and not necessary for most of the commander's activities. Still, protocol was protocol, and Galt had to be present for their occasional meetings with the other head officers. Since they lacked Army and drop troop elements, the most veteran Marine captain had been selected for the role. The other 3 head officers present, also selected through similar processes, were in charge of overseeing the logistical, intelligence, and engineering divisions. At first, he questioned why he had to be present for their reunions since, while he was an officer, he simply couldn't compare with the status, standing, and rank the other men and women present had, both in terms of military and nobility. But Redford had dispelled his doubts by simply stating that he was permitted to assist those meetings as his second in command. Again, technically speaking, it should be Clara who had to carry such duties as she was the captain of the ship, but she delegated those concerns to her executive officer, Redford Kalin. Despite the recruits from Woodshaft and a few selected personnel gained in Matcha for vital areas, they were still understaffed and undermanned. That was a problem that, if the Noir Navio were to be any other ship built in the Principality, would present a danger to not only the crew, but its long-term operational capabilities. Luckily for all, the Noir Navio was frighteningly self-sufficient with automated processes that kept it running at maximum efficiency, even while understaffed. He glanced at the gray-haired man who had taken him under his tutelage much like a Clixall parent would teach its offspring how to hunt and scavenge for food. Wyatt found the man focused on the data pad and thought about how different this meeting was from the others. He never voiced an opinion, for none was needed before. The head officers would come in, exchange pleasantries, give a short, concise report that quickly grew repetitive with rare and minor alterations, and then be dismissed before the 5-minute mark. He had been barely able to exchange a few words with Galt after each meeting before their duties forced them apart. The pilot had been frustrated by his inability to thank the man for his aid, but at least he had a gift almost ready to convey his gratitude properly. Be that as it may, something was different during this meeting. The head officers, he noticed, were tense even if they tried to hide it. There was a measurable amount of displeasure marring their expressions. Though, if I have to be honest, it's not hard to guess what's got them so visibly agitated, Wyatt reasoned a few seconds before the commander set his datapad down and his cybernetic eyes analyzed each of the 6 officers filling a seat around the table. If you have something to say, then voice your concerns. You are not children waiting for my permission to speak, Redford said in the same tone a father would speak to a troublesome child. Taking the initiative, the older, tall, and muscular Fabian Deschire, acting head officer of the Marine Division, was the first to speak. Commander, I believe I speak on behalf of all those who are present when I say that, while we won't object against the order given by Her Beloved Majesty Princess Clara, many have come to us in confidence to let their displeasure be known. My brother speaks truthfully, Commander. Even the commoners are outspoken against the idea of integrating reprehensible pirates into our ranks. Among them, I believe, the Auxilia will not tolerate any pirate to join them, even if the princess herself orders them to. Hatred, resentment, and anger will ensure any of them be found dead shortly after their integration through unfortunate accidents, the logistical head officer warned before sharing a glance with her brother. Wyatt frowned internally. He could smell their lying breath from across the table, but he had to admit that the Desher siblings, Fabian and Saratan Deschire, were capable speakers and knew how to mask their real intentions behind a veil of truth. It was not a secret that after it was announced that some of the captured pirates would be pardoned and integrated into the Noir Navio's personnel, many had been outraged at Clara's decision. He, too, had been initially displeased and had every intention of asking the blonde woman what her purpose was. However, the more he thought about it and pushed aside his personal feelings, he hoped the potential glimpse of opportunity he was imagining was not a mere illusion set before him. The siblings, both very attractive, sharing cybernetic eyes and pale blonde hair, were using said outrage in their favor, but their claims were obvious lies. No matter how much the auxilia, staff members, general crew members, and other commoner personnel barked and protested against a royal, an Aster at that, they would obey in the end, even if begrudgingly. No commoner would risk angering a royal and, more importantly, their hard-earned place in the military for a simple discontent. Judging by Redford's unmoving expression, the aged commander thought the same. Let the commoners be outspoken, and those that act against the order given by their princess shall be punished accordingly. Her command is immutable, and it shall be carried out without fail, Redford replied, and turned his attention to Lupin Lusanto, head officer of the engineering division. His eyes were vibrant and red, like scarlet marbles, while his brown hair adorned his trimmed head. Everything about the tall, lanky man screamed how superior he was compared to everyone else, starting with his immaculate uniform, sharp features, and the perfumed aroma that followed him everywhere. "Has this malcontent reached your division, Lupin?" "Indeed it has, Commander," Lupin replied with a nasal but elegant voice. "Although I must add it has not been as pronounced as in other divisions. My personnel only care about performing their duties and nothing more," boasted the prim and proper man. "Sabraska?" Redford asked, turning to the woman with a purple hue that shone across the length of her long, otherwise black hair. Her gray, synthetic eyes portrayed an edge of humor that she did not bother to hide. "The staff and the crew whine about it, but they know their place. It is the nobles who voice the largest protest but will not move against an order given by Her Majesty," replied Sabraska Kaspars, Lieutenant Commodore and head officer of the Logistical Division recommended by Vivan Tiravis herself. "However, I must voice my concern over the fact that the pirates have split into 3 factions after their leaders delivered upon them the princess's deal. They are quarreling amongst each other, and a brawl is likely to spark at any given moment. Animals, all of them, unable to contain their savage nature and spit upon the mercy bestowed upon them by our beloved princess," Lupin, technician-in-chief, added, his tone showing a measured disdain. Wyatt contained the urge to roll his eyes. Being a commoner, he was no stranger to the ancient art of showing submission and, as Weskel would put it, kissing ass. But even in that field, the nobility showcased an entirely different level of mastery that amused him. If Redford's barely noticeable eyebrow twitch was anything to go by, then the older man was experiencing annoyance at the display carried out by the lanky man. "Be that as it may, Sabraska has brought up a valid concern. We can't split them apart. That'll only dissuade those who may be redeemable from seeing the value in what Her Majesty is offering them and turn them back to their misguided, twisted ideals," Redford reasoned, and crossed his arms before turning his gaze to Wyatt. "Lieutenant Staples, you've been pensive this entire time. Do you have anything to add?" Wyatt stiffened slightly at being suddenly thrust into the center of attention. What is Commander Redford planning? The pilot asked himself as he exchanged a short-lived glance with his commanding officer. Questioning his motives would solve nothing, so instead he thought about the dilemma at hand, slightly tilting his head as he pinched his chin. But the question was, what could he even add to the conversation? The problem to solve was the pirates themselves. The auxilia and pretty much everyone else hated them with justified passion. He saw them as criminals except for the babies and the unmarked children. What could even be done about them except for throwing them out to the void or handing them over to other authorities so they could be dealt with? He also had no idea what Clara was trying to gain by showing her clemency except for what he thought was a likely possibility. He could be wrong about it, but he had nothing else to work with. If he had to give a proper answer, he first needed more information. He had made the rushed decision to destroy the freighter without a second doubt, and that could have spelled the doom of several innocents, no matter if they were pirates or not. He had made one crucial mistake that no pilot should ever make. He had not taken into account the circumstances around him and rushed ahead without a plan in mind. Filled with determination, he turned to Sabraska. What are these factions you mentioned, Lady Sabraska? Sabraska blinked, surprised, before answering. There are those that chastise their leaders as weaklings that surrendered to the principality and sold them out for their own gain. I wouldn't waste my time with them. Pirates through and through who believe themselves to be morally superior freedom fighters or some other delusion, she scoffed. Most of the oldest and some of the most heavily indoctrinated young ones are in this group. The second faction is made up of the ones that want to take the deal. The third and largest faction is largely undecided and is the only thing keeping a semblance of peace when our guards aren't looking. Wyatt hummed deeply. Thank you, Lady Sabraska, he replied politely, and with a tinge of submission, slightly bowing his head in the process. Internally, he wanted to kick himself for doing so, but he couldn't help it. During their occasional get-togethers, Clara had taken it upon herself to teach him tidbits about mannerisms that would be useful to him now that he was a noble. One she constantly touched upon was for him to avoid showing submission, fear, or blind obedience to other nobles just because they were nobles. So far, that had proven to be a monumental task. She was asking him to stop doing something he had been taught to do since he could first remember. Being deferential to nobles was part of the daily life of a commoner, and the consequences for not being so could be dire. It was an essential part of his education, and most times did so automatically. Being disrespectful or confrontational was not a wise move to make, and his diligence had spared him from many a punishment, and he could always complain and curse at the nobles in his mind and in private. But now things were different, and he had to change fundamental things about himself in order to adapt to his new reality. Shaking those thoughts aside, he turned to the Desher siblings. Lord and Lady Desher, how likely would it be for the pirates that accept the clemency offered by our princess to die at the hands of the Auxilia, the Marines, or belligerent crew members? Fabian turned to his sister, his eyes glowing faintly for a few seconds before Saraton replied. Lieutenant, are you insinuating that Marines, proud members of noble houses all, would do something so dishonorable? Wyatt stammered as he recoiled at the accusation, but as he felt an apology crawl up his throat, he swallowed it, and his posture turned solid. With his left hand, he gestured at her brother. Lord, your brother has already made that insinuation. He paused, seeing Fabian glare at him, but nothing more than that. Then, he continued, the Auxilia are the most outspoken, this is true, but no one is pleased with us housing pirates outside the brig. This includes the Marines and myself, of course. Believe me when I say I would dispose of those bearing marks without hesitation. Saraton, he said, barely able to stop himself from adding a lady before her name. I fail to see how this is relevant, Lieutenant, Fabian remarked curtly. Ignoring the pale blonde man, Wyatt turned to Lupin. Lupin, would it be possible to seal off the area in which the pirates are now? Lupin hummed softly, his fingers dancing on the table as he drummed on it a few times before replying. It would take time, but it could be done, Lieutenant Staples, Lupin replied, not too happy that he had to show someone of inferior rank a measure of respect, no matter the reason. Lieutenant Wyatt, if I may ask, what are you thinking about? Galt finally spoke up, confused yet intrigued. Meanwhile, Redford remained silent, waiting patiently. Turning to the red-haired man, Wyatt raised a finger. We can't integrate the pirates that may accept the princess's offer because that will cause unavoidable conflict. At least not directly. Turning to Commander Redford, he noticed that the gray-haired man was now looking at him with interest. Emboldened by the lack of a rebuke, he pressed on. What if we isolate them and put them through a program under the care of veteran officers charged with re-educating them and training them properly? Pardon? You must surely be jesting. Have you lost your mind? Madness, utter madness! Sabraska, Lupin, and the Desher siblings exclaimed one after the other. Galt was looking at him as if he had just vomited all over his uniform, while Redford leaned back on his chair, deep in thought. I assure you I am sound of mind, I hope. Wyatt thought the last two words with some trepidation. Driven by courage he was not feeling inside his heart, he continued. Her Majesty, Princess Clara, wishes to spare as many of these wretched pirates as she can and draw them to her side. Pirates. These criminals are anarchists and failed rebels, criminal scum that deserve no pity or mercy, yet she has granted it to these lucky few. But many of them are young and innocent. It matters not. They're criminals deserving of punishment, Fabian replied. Princess Clara thinks otherwise, Wyatt countered, and Fabian flinched. I know what I'm suggesting is difficult to process, but what other alternative, aside from doing nothing and letting chaos ensue, do we have if we are to carry out Her Majesty's orders? The room went silent for a few seconds, giving the pilot much-needed time to organize his thoughts. How many pirates were captured in total? Galt cleared his throat. 34 babies, with 2 of them perishing, 107 children of various ages, and 258 adolescents. Of the children, 46 are unmarked. Wyatt nodded in thanks. Giving them a standard education is impossible and impractical. Their entire worldview has been centered around survival and violence. The children could be saved and maybe some adolescents, but those too ingrained in the ways of life of a pirate will never accept the princess's offer. But how do we get as many of them to question their way of life? Simple. Appeal to their survival instincts and their selfishness. Many are doubtful thanks to the rations, clean water, and fresh clothes given to them, are they not? He asked, turning his gaze to Sabraska. You are correct, Lieutenant. There are doubtful among their numbers, the purple-hue-haired woman replied with a chuckle. They devour standard commoner rations as if it was a meal prepared by a professional chef. It is laughable. Then we use that in our favor, Wyatt agreed. We could simply force them into service as conscripts and be done with it since Her Majesty wants them. It would save the lives of some auxilia forces during assaults, and that way cleanse their crimes with their deaths, said the Deshire woman, cold and distant but methodical. If that's what the princess wanted, she would have done it from the start. No, I believe she desires to convert as many of these pirates into something worthwhile as possible, but it must be their choice. I do not know why she could desire such a thing, Wyatt countered. And it was true. Clara had yet to tell him what her great plan was by pardoning as many of them as possible. Looking around the table, he saw that the head officers, Galt included, were giving his words some credence. But it was enough. He needed something with more weight, and he knew exactly what to use in his favor. I'm trying to shoot at a running Klickzahl with a faulty rifle while blindfolded in the middle of a storm. I hope I'm right about what Clara wants out of this, Wyatt thought before crossing his arms and humming deeply, regaining the attention of everyone. Or perhaps we are not reading the princess's orders correctly? Lupin leaned forth, frowning. Explain, he demanded. Why would the princess want these pirates at all? I may be wrong in believing this, but doesn't this sound more like a test for us? Wyatt asked, and suddenly the temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. Only Redford and Galt remained mostly unfazed by his words. Perhaps. The princess wishes to see how we would solve such a problem and fulfill it to the best of our capabilities? Measure who is competent and who is replaceable? A few seconds of silence marked the end of his question, broken only after Saraton Deshire made her voice known. That could be factual, she agreed, trying to hide the shaky fear that rumbled in her throat. Your suggestion has merit if we take such a possibility, no matter how slim, into consideration. Some low-ranking Marines could be used as instructors, Fabian offered, as some of my men could impart their skills into breaking apart their feeble indoctrination, Saraton added, following her brother's line of thinking. It would be bothersome, but I suppose that a section of the storage area they are currently using could be hastily isolated and adapted to act as the barracks for those filthy animals. I would, however, require authorization and the number of recruits that would need to be housed, Lupin added. Securing the rest in the brig and the resources necessary won't be a problem. We have a surplus of everything as we are, Sabraska joined in. Before we jump into any decisions, tell me, Lieutenant Staples, why do you believe spending so much effort on mere pirates is sound, more so when you are basing your decisions on assumptions? Redford's voice cut through like a plasma cutter through a flimsy steel door. Forgive me for being so bold, Commander, but I simply cannot think of any other possible reason as to why Her Majesty would want to keep these pirates not only alive, but seek to integrate those that can be given a chance to serve the Principality, Wyatt replied, pausing for a moment to swallow a ball of nerves that had formed inside his throat. Most of all, aren't they useful? Useful? Redford questioned, raising an eyebrow. At best, those that accept and are then trained to be semi-reliable combatants could develop a sense of belonging or see what being a pirate really means. At worst, they could be shoved to join the mercenaries and be of use in some capacity. Who knows? Perhaps there could be one or two among them who can surprise us and show skills in other fields like technology, logistical support, or even as pilots. A far-fetched possibility, but one that holds merit, Redford agreed tentatively. It is true that conflict is inevitable, so minimizing the damage should be among our top priorities. However, these redeemed pirates could never be fully trusted to join the Auxilia. They would become their own unit, one under the purview of the princess or one of her closest confidants. Now it was Wyatt's turn to feel a sudden chill run down his spine after hearing Redford's words. "Does anyone have anything else to add?" No one replied. "If so, you are dismissed. Lieutenant Staples, Ensign Tirome, you are to remain here," Redford commanded. The rest of the head officers were quick to leave the war room, leaving only 3 men inside it. Once alone, the aged commander rubbed his temples before letting out a long, hearty chuckle. "Nicely done, Wyatt. You keep surprising me at every turn, both good and bad." "What?" Wyatt thought, confused. "What is he talking about?" "Excuse me, Commander, but I fail to understand what I've done to receive your praise." Redford's lips curled into a soft, tiny smile before replying. "You truly do not realize what you've done, do you?" "I wouldn't be asking otherwise, don't you think so, Commander?" Wyatt thought with mild annoyance, though his expression remained puzzled. "Wyatt, are you certain you've never received proper training as an officer?" Galt asked, looking at him worriedly. "Commoner," Wyatt replied with a frown as he pointed at himself. "My training has only come so far with the lessons Commander Redford has given me. I'm struggling to memorize the chain of command and learn the rules of engagement and etiquette among officers and superiors," he answered and turned to the still smiling Redford. "Commander, please, what have I done?" "Simply put, Wyatt, you've successfully done exactly what the princess wanted to achieve," Redford answered. "He did? I did?" Galt and Wyatt asked at the same time, slack-jawed. "Quite so," Redford said, losing his smile. "My head officers are good at what they do, but they are, at the end of the day, set on their ways. Unimaginative, caring more about their status and quick solutions, not the right ones. You aren't as stiff as the others, Galt, but you can improve. Wyatt, you may lack the years of training spent at the academy and the honing through long, dull service that others have, but you hold an innate ability to think, solve puzzles, and search for alternatives. You demonstrated such talent shortly after we met when you deduced that the Third Fleet had joined Duke Draymore." Galt Tirome's eyes widened slightly as he stared at the young pilot, while said pilot looked flabbergasted. "Every achievement after that and your dismal learning rate on how an officer should be and act has led me to conclude that I cannot train you as a conventional officer. You are a man of decisive action, but also one who can look into the smaller picture and extrapolate the bigger one whilst, simultaneously, thinking outside the box. I've come to detest this word as of late, but there is no other way to describe you as anything other than paradoxical. Now that I know how I can train you, expect our lessons to truly begin," Redford exclaimed with a glint in his eye. "That is—" "I'll be honored, Commander," Wyatt replied, his mind reeling as he tried to process everything the older pilot was telling him. "If I can serve Clara, the Principality, and perform my duty better, I shall do anything to make it possible," he proclaimed without measuring his words. Redford gave him a solid nod of approval. "As you've correctly deduced, Clara wants to save as many of the pirates as possible and turn them into something worthwhile. The youngest children will be instructed and guided to discover any potential talents they may possess. But those over 12 shall be inducted into their own combat unit, mostly for support operations. Children and poorly trained teenagers make for terrible frontline soldiers and boarders," the gray-haired man hummed, letting out a long, tired but satisfied sigh. "By playing into their weaknesses and giving them a window of opportunity to believe they were acting on their own initiative, you've ensured that Her Majesty's objective has a higher chance of becoming a reality," he explained. "At any rate, these redeemed criminals will be useful one way or another and enjoy the prospect of a better life. Then again, it is difficult to find anything worse than being a pirate. Who knows? Maybe they can be used as an example to other pirates in the future that an alternative is possible for them. Guaranteed meals, payment, medical treatment, and a sense of belonging. I wonder how many will stick to their anarchistic ideals when faced with such opportunities. Galt asked no one, then looked at Wyatt with a sense of admiration. You truly are a man of honor, mercy, and many surprises, Wyatt Staples. I can't tell them. I can't tell them that I was just following a hunch, not after receiving their praises like that. No, I have to tell them. I won't lie to them, Wyatt thought, and just as he was about to speak out, a familiar voice called in his mind. Wyatt, come to my quarters. I need your help, urgently. Whatever shame and sense of guilt he felt was gone in an instant as he stood up, startling the two men at the suddenness of his action. He saluted and stammered a quick "The princess summons me," before leaving as fast as his legs could take him. Redford crossed his arms and turned to Galt. Before you are dismissed, Galt, once the unit is formed, you'll be in charge of overseeing its development. Galt did a double-take. Commander, certainly there are those more qualified. There are, but the princess is in short supply of those she can trust. This shall be my own test to measure your gratitude and loyalty, Galt Tyrum. Work with the other head officers and ensure nothing goes awry. I shall give you further instructions at a later date. For now, you're dismissed, Redford commanded. Galt stood up and gave the older man a salute, but didn't turn to leave just yet. Sir? If I may, can I ask why Lieutenant Wyatt is not the one chosen to perform this task? Even if he could handle more than what he already can, I would not consider him to be a prime candidate for such a position, Redford replied puzzlingly. Dismissed. Galt saluted once more and then left the war room, leaving the aged commander alone with his thoughts. Have you listened to these other amazing stories on our channel yet? All the links can be found in the description, and we have something for everyone.